A couple of weeks ago, we had on an impressive young man named Braden Sorbo. He's written a book entitled Embrace Masculinity. Turns out he has a kindred spirit. We welcome to the truth today Karen Straughan. She is a critic of feminism and an advocate for men's rights. I can't wait to hear about this. Karen, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So, what set you down this path of criticizing members of your own sex and supporting dudes like me?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Back in the sort of late 2000s, right around 2008, 2009, I was going through divorce, and I had also started writing dirty books for women. And so I was a member of a bunch of, I guess, review websites and writers' websites and stuff like that. And one day somebody came along and just in the comment section and said, look at these losers over here. Let's go and give them what for in their comment section. And it was a website called The Spearhead, men's website, and it talked about all kinds of things. The article that they were pointing to was a complaint that you can't find hard science fiction anymore in books or in movies. It always has to have something to appeal to the ladies. Otherwise, and so like some kind of romance or something like that. And yeah, it was a petty complaint. But then I watched all of these feminist women just bombard the comment section under this article with all of this sexual shaming language, like you probably just have a small penis, or you just can't get laid, or all of this just very uh, you know stereotypically attacking them based on like sexual stereotypes. And and I was just like blown away, because we're supposed to, as feminists are supposed to not be sexist, and all of these insults they were spewing were like totally sexist. Anyway, so I started talking with these guys, and they were a rough and ready bunch of guys. They didn't put up with any guff, and I saw women come and go, and I stuck around, and I read the other articles on the website, and the articles went into like multiple facets of the masculinity and men's condition, men's circumstances in the world right now. So legal, policy wise, uh, just in terms of just sort of the undermining of the social contract between men and women, divorce, child custody, domestic violence, all kinds of things, and they always had either common sense or research to back up what they were saying. And you know, as a woman who was going through a divorce, any woman who's initiated divorce can give you like a 1,000 item list of everything he did wrong, right? All the ways he screwed up to mess up the marriage, right? But I was like, well, I don't want to have a repeat of this breakup, right? Like I don't want to do this. I don't want to do over, right? I don't want to make the same mistake again. So I actually asked these guys, okay, so what did I do? What do you think I did wrong? How can you help me figure out how to not make the same mistake again? And these guys, I mean, like I said, they were tough. Um, they were very firm and very stern and very honest. And but most of all, they let me into their minds and their hearts, and to see how men tick. And that is what set me on the path to understanding masculinity, why it's necessary, um, why it can be dangerous, but is probably it's like a multi-tool, right? You can cut off your toe, or you can perform any useful task with it. So it's just men are absolutely 100% necessary. And all we've been doing since probably the 1970s is undermining their position in society.
And what do you
So,
think the motivation is for that in our society and culture to have an all-out assault on masculinity and men? I mean, where is it coming from, and what is the end game? I mean, to what end are these people trying to achieve by, I don't know what the term is, to
okay, I think basically the impulse that is being exploited here is the impulse to protect and provide for women. This is the primary impulse on the part of both men and women and societies to protect and provide for women. And so once you tap into that, and then you have to realize that, there are some women who are abused by their husbands. There are some women who are married to deadbeats, right? Who don't take care of them, who don't provide for them. There are some women who are, in bad circumstances because of the men that they're with. So one of the first things that happened, once society got prosperous enough and the tax base got broad enough, one of the first things that we did was we liberated women that from the necessity of marriage, right? From the necessity of the intact family. And when we did that, well, what did we have to do? We had to basically subsidize job opportunities for women, career opportunities for women, and we also had to subsidize single mothers. And that set off a chain of events, right? A kind of a cascading positive feedback loop of social dysfunction that has resulted in now, in some populations in the US, Hispanics, blacks, and increasingly whites as well. You're looking at a 50% or greater in illegitimacy rate. You're looking at, the marriage rate in the 1970s in Canada was 85%. The marriage rate today is 30%. And,
that's a staggering
basically,
statistic.
yeah. And basically that has come about because we've sold women a bill of goods by saying this is what's good for you. What you need to do is you need to first go to university, then you need to get your career underway, you need to become, self-sufficient, you need to, maybe even buy a house and, have a nice car and all of these things. And they're doing all of that in their 20s when their sexual market value is its highest, because they're the most fertile, they're the most able to have healthy children, and they're the most physically attracted at that time. And then by the time they hit 30, and oh, there's no hurry. There's no hurry. And you don't have to hurry up to settle down. And you definitely don't have to settle, right? For anybody who earns less than you or has a career with less status than yours, or a degree that's not as prestigious as yours, right? So when you actually look at it, when women hit 30, and I know a woman who's in this position right now, she's 32, she's got the baby rabies, something fierce, right? And she does not have any prospects in terms of forming a long-term relationship. And the problem is that when you start dating at 32, right, the guy knows you're in a hurry, right? The guy knows you have a limited amount of time, right? So it isn't going to be like, okay, a year-long courtship, and then we're going to, get married and move in together, and then we're going to save up, and then in 3 years we'll start trying to have a kid the way things used to go. It's going to be impregnate me now, or I'm going to move on to the next guy who might impregnate me, and who might be willing to go along with this. And women are increasingly in their 30s, women with good careers, engineers, nurses, doctors, are increasingly, lawyers, having to settle for men who are. I read this article about women who were marrying down, professional women who were marrying down. And it featured a couple, and they refused to give their names because it would be too embarrassing for the lawyer wife to admit that she was married to a plumber.
Okay.
This is where we're at. And what we're doing is we're kneecapping men in terms of post-secondary education. Women are now 65% of post-secondary attendees, right? And so I mean they're coming out with their degrees, right? With their prestigious degrees and their prestigious careers, and there are no men in their bracket, right, that they are willing to partner with, because we've artificially boosted women in education and artificially suppressed men.
That's the part that I don't really get. I mean, I've
It's because they
certainly,
don't want to acknowledge human nature.
yeah, well, just I mean, the realities of life and the world and the laws of nature. I've never really had a problem with, and in fact, celebrate the rise of women in the workplace. I mean, since I was in grammar school, I've recognized that women, I think, are smarter than men. You can't really generalize like that, but that's sort of been my experience. That in uh, grammar school and middle school, high school, the girls always got the best grades.
Yeah, and that's because they're more diligent,
Maybe I don't
right,
know. I
and
mean,
compliant.
and so I've always been very willing to work with females in the workplace and never gave it a second thought, really. First job I had a female boss. That was did actually take a little getting used to. But she was so bright and so diligent and hardworking that I respected her. And so therefore I was willing to take a delegation from her without any pushback. So, and I think that, how can you argue that two people doing the same job should not be paid at the same wage, given equal performance? And so
Sure.
I celebrate all that stuff. But I also really like girls, and I really like femininity. And I don't see where the feminism conversation needs to marginalize men. I mean, why can't we have our cake and eat it too? I mean, why can't we allow and encourage women to work and to get equal treatment in the workplace, but still allow the rules of nature to prevail? Who are we to try and change that?
Oh, well, the rules of nature. Okay, so there's a reason why women are hypergamous. Hypergamy being the tendency to marry up the social ladder or the socioeconomic ladder. They want to marry somebody who earns more than them and has higher social status than them. Okay, and this is, like, I do not begrudge this. This was, I mean, whether you want to take a biblical approach to it, or whether you want to take an evolutionary approach to it, or kind of fuse the two of those, right? Women are, when women have babies, right? When they're pregnant and they have babies and they're nursing, they need to be taken care of. And also, the new mouth to feed also has to be taken care of. And so, whatever mate a woman chooses is going to have to not just provide as much as she can do on her own. He has to provide more. He has to be able to, because she can already take care of herself and he can already take care of himself, but he has to take care of multiple people in order for her to feel safe and secure in her ability to raise her small children. Like, this is absolutely, it's ingrained in women. It goes back thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, arguably, and there's no getting rid of it. Okay, but what we've done is we've priced women out of the market, basically, or Well, we've helped women price themselves out of the marriage market, because now for every 8 female lawyers, there are 4 male lawyers, and for every 8 female doctors, there are 4 male doctors, and a male doctor will marry a nurse. A male doctor will marry a girl who folds scarves at the Gap if she's an entertaining conversationalist, right, and physically attractive, right? A female doctor will not marry a male nurse or a plumber or anyone who is anything less than a male doctor, and often she won't marry a male general practitioner because she wants a surgeon, or somebody who's in differential diagnostics, or somebody who's a pathologist or something like that, right? That he's a specialist, he's specialized, he went to extra years of school, and now he does brain surgery on young children with cancer and stuff like that, right? That's what she wants, because why would she want just a lame old GP like her, right? So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, we've completely screwed this up. And as far as I can tell, the intentions were good, but when you look at when did the single parenthood, single motherhood epidemic start? It started with the war on poverty. That's where it started, right? Because back then, and it's changed now, but too late. But back then, Americans were not willing to pay able-bodied, employable men to sit at home and not work. They were willing to pay mothers who did not have male partners but had children. They were willing to pay them to sit at home and not work and look after those children, right? So that incentivized a huge amount of men to leave their families, because it was, if they were underemployed or sporadically employed or unemployed, it was at least a paycheck for their kids, right? And it also incentivized a whole bunch of women to kick their men out, to kick their husbands out. And because it was the best way to secure a steady paycheck. The government is now the husband. And, on top of that, she doesn't have to put up with the government farting in bed or leaving his dirty socks all over the floor, right? She doesn't have to pick up after him. She doesn't have to fetch him a beer, right? She doesn't have to do any of that. And so, but the government is going to pay her on the regular in order to be able to raise her kids by herself, as long as there's no man in the house. And that really kicked off the scourge of single motherhood and fatherless children. And when children are fatherless, when you look at particularly with boys, if you don't have a father in your house, what's your first kind of on the regular, almost on the daily male, responsible, decent male role model? Your grade 8 math teacher? The entire rest of your childhood is dominated by women.
So what is appropriate for men, and how they are to react to all of this? Do they just keep their head down and keep soldiering on? It seems like women have a unique ability to kind of work together, conspire against men. I don't know, girl power. They talk about it. If guys talk like that, they're sexist.
Oh, of course, and you even see this, in the the phrase is confession through projection, right? So the whole narrative of patriarchy, like men have always oppressed women, and that's been their primary goal, was to oppress and exploit women. Well, that's the feminist model of the world, because feminists are probably the most self-absorbed and selfish of women. And so they were like, if I were in charge of everything and setting all the rules, I would totally oppress the opposite sex and exploit them, right? And treat them like dirt. So, you know, that's not what men have been doing throughout history. That's absolutely not. Men have always cared about women to the highest level of what they can afford, right? You know, how societies have always cared about women and taken care of women and protected and provided for them to the top level that they can afford, right? And we just couldn't afford as much way back when, you know, in the 17th century and you know, back in biblical times, we couldn't afford to care about anybody that much. Um, and when you actually look at you know, the apex fallacy, right, that they engage in, right? Well, 90% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are men, and therefore, right, all men are basically CEOs, and all women are basically secretaries, and also maids and like chambermaids and waitresses and things like that, right? No, and the wage gap too, right? They take this statistic, they just add up everybody's salary, year annual salary, like what they earn throughout the course of the year if they're employed year round. And teachers are included in this, even though they get 3 months off every year. Um, and they just add it up and then they just divide it, they average it out. Oh, and men earn more than women, and that's not fair. Well, okay, except for men and women do different jobs. And if you actually compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, the wage gap is not 80 cents to a man's dollar, it's like 98 cents to a man's dollar. And even that, you can't really, there are some factors in there that you just can't quantify, like the willingness and successfulness of negotiating your pay and things like that. Um, but when you look at the hours worked, you know, like once even just factoring in overtime hours and willingness to work weekends or graveyard shifts, right? When you factor that in, even though it's the same work, if you're doing it between midnight and 8 a.m. rather than between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., you're going to get paid more.
Yeah.
And men are more willing to do that. And that's just the way it is. And they have to pay more for the graveyard shifts or nobody would work them because women aren't going to.
Well, you've certainly given us a lot to think about and have provoked some great thought. You know, I talk politics on this channel all the time. It's hard to talk about politics without talking about race. And I'm pretty comfortable talking about race and just feel like I try and tell the truth and don't conform to a narrative. And I, I started out being somewhat timid about it because, you know, if you say the wrong thing with the best of intentions, it can really backfire. I find myself in talking to you today to be very timid about talking about the sexes. And I don't know where that comes from. I guess I just don't want to be mislabeled a misogynist. And we throw out all these adjectives and people get, I think it has a chilling effect, basically. And it really kind of prevents us from being able to have honest dialogue for fear of saying the wrong thing and having to pay the ultimate price.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. If the patriarchy, if the system that sets all the rules, right? You know, like the patriarchy that lives up in the sky and dictates everything we do and how all our laws and our social interactions go and all of that, right? If that system was misogynistic, then calling somebody a misogynist would just be like calling somebody normal. It wouldn't be an insult. It wouldn't be silencing. It wouldn't be capable of silencing anybody. Now, call somebody a misandrist, and they're just like, whatever. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like, okay, a misandrist is somebody who hates or fears, irrationally hates or fears men. Uh, okay. You call somebody a misandrist, if they even know what it means, they don't care that you called them a misandrist,
Is that
right?
is that in part a consequence of the Me Too movement? I mean,
Oh no, it's been going on. Like, the word misandry has existed for forever. Same with androphobia; it's been around a long time, but it doesn't didn't show up on spell correct until probably about 5 6 years ago, and it just was. It's never been anything that anybody found insulting, right? I mean, you look at the roles that we expect of men. We expect them to go out in the uh, in the harsh weather and fix things for us, so that women can flip a light switch or turn on a tap and it'll do what it's supposed to do, right? We expect men to go to war for us and die for us. We expect men to leap in front of bullets when there's a mass shooting or something to protect women and children. When they fail to do that, when they instead run away, then they're called cowards, right? So, I mean, like, we have evolved to just not care about men in the same ways that we care about women, in terms of keeping them safe from whatever might harm or upset them, right? And this is the same with children, right? We don't want, children cry. Well, why do they cry? It's because they're summoning expert adult help to help them resolve a problem or a situation that is making them hurt or upset, right? And that's why women cry, and that's why men have a hard time crying, and it's biological. Men have a hard time crying because nobody cares when men cry. The best thing that can happen.
you say nobody cares
The
when
only
men
thing that's
cry?
going to happen. Nobody. Well, okay, they'll shame them. They'll think that the
Yeah,
guy's
they're
drunk or
weak.
there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
Weak and weak and all of that. I mean, like, if you're a man and you're crying, that means that you're advertising yourself as vulnerable. And back, thousands of years ago, a man didn't want to advertise that, because if he did, considering his role, which was often to fight off enemies, that would signal to the enemy that, okay, that's the first guy we're going to take out,
Well, I'll tell you,
because he's the
I've never seen
easiest
Donald
target.
Trump with a tear in his eye or a lump in his throat. And
You're allowed to cry when a football player retires.
On that note, thank you, Karen Straughan. Fascinating conversation to be continued. I'm not sure we've solved any of the problems, but we've certainly identified a bunch of them. Thank you for coming on The Truth today, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks so much.